Welcome into the Dynasty After Party here on Club Fantasy FFL. We are back. My name is Michael Sicoli. I'm joined, as always, by Joel Wirth, who's going to be hopping on in just a second. We're talking three more teams today for the Dynasty team previews. Talking Eagles, talking Browns, and talking the Dallas Cowboys, dem boys. We're going to be going into all of that real soon, diving into the Dynasty implications of everything you've done this offseason and what we can expect for 2024. So without further ado, let's jump right into the episode. What's going on, Joel? How is your Sunday treating you? We got another Dynasty After Party episode to talk about.
Good. Welcome back, man. Good to see you. You've been on assignment with your real life job, so
yeah. No. Busier summer than I thought it would be. So
understood. Yeah, but it's good to have you back. I'm a little disappointed that Josh couldn't get with Aerosmith and get a 1-day waiver to use Back in the Saddle as our intro music or something like that.
I think I'll forget.
He's got the scratch for it. So
from what I hear, sources say that that Aerosmith is busy nowadays. But sources also says that they're fans of the show, allegedly. So it'd be obviously. So
I mean, we see Joe Perry in the chat every week. So.
Every week, yeah, undoubtedly every single week. But either way, it's good to have everyone back in the show here this week. Good to be back myself. Good to hopefully see a few comments here today. So remember, keep them rolling in. It's a live show. We always love to see your thoughts and comments. We're going, like I said at the intro, we're going to jump into the Eagles, Browns, and Cowboys today and all the changes they've gone through and what we can expect for 2024. Joel, I feel like you had something on the tip of your tongue there.
No, it's the deadest period of the league. We hit the headlines and there's nothing, except by this time next week there will be teams reporting for camp, the Bears and the Texans, who play in the Hall of Fame game, literally report during the week this week. So it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. The 17th and the 19th, I think they report. So by Wednesday, Thursday, we should have actual training camp. I don't know, news, but you'll start to see stuff kind of trickle in. So
turning heads headlines is
getting one. Your time off is over. It's coming. So.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be turning heads. Everyone's in the best shape of their life starting next week, which will be a lot of fun, as you say. And also, good to see Mr. Scampers. Good to be back as well. Good morning to you as well. Before we jump into these Eagles, Browns, and Cowboys and talk about everything that you need to know, there's something else you need to know. I just want to make sure you all know about Dynasty Nerds and their amazing work and the amazing tools that they have. So if you want to win the championship, if you want to stack those championships for years to come, you really need to know about Dynasty Nerds, who's now a partner with Club Fantasy. They're one of the most trusted sources for both Dynasty advice and Dynasty tools. Their Nerd Score helps identify rookies with high ceilings and longevity to keep you in contention for years. So if you're looking for film, that's how I first introduced myself to Dynasty Nerds. They look for film. You can look at their all-22 room. They have a trade calculator. They have a whole bunch of stuff that's amazing. So if you want to sign up for a subscription with them, we got a code Club Fantasy. Code Club Fantasy. You get 15% off your subscription. You just go to dynastynerds.com, use promo code Club Fantasy to get 15% off your subscription. They're great guys. I love their podcast as well, and their tools are exceptional. So it's all the stuff we use to try to give you guys the best Dynasty info that we can. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I mentioned on the Thursday show that did my Scott Fishbowl live draft in Cleveland a week ago Saturday. Was put on by Rich Dotson from Dynasty Nerds. Dennis Bennett, Jared Wackerly from the Nerds team were both there, both in my draft league. So, and shout out to Rich's wife, who kind of did a bunch of work behind the scenes to make everything happen. So, great guys and a great site. So highly recommend you checking them out if you haven't already.
100%. Could not recommend it more. Now, since I don't think we have any big NFL news of the last week, but correct me if I'm wrong, Joel. Has anything crazy happened in the last week that we want to talk about before we jump into the Eagles?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
As dead a period as you're going to get. So
Yeah, no football changes at least. So let's jump right on into the Philadelphia Eagles, who were disappointing last season for many. We had a lot of struggles with this Nick Sirianni team to the point where we saw that people were calling for Nick Sirianni to get fired by the end of the year, a year after making the Super Bowl. So same regime here. We got Nick Sirianni once again calling the plays, once calling it as head coach. Um, Front office is intact with Howie Roseman. Jalen Hurts is back once again as a very paid man. A.J. Brown is there. Devonta Smith is here. Dallas Goedert. It's very much a run it back at everything except for the running back position for the Eagles. So it feels only fitting to start right there, Joel, with Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this Kellen Moore offense is different from what they did last year. Obviously, it's going to be different. Last year was kind of a cluster F, just from a play calling standpoint, but especially going from Shane Steichen, that's a pretty significant drop off to wherever you're going, and then
the Nick Sirianni
didn't work out. Yeah. So I'm kind of down on Barkley. I think relative to the market, I don't think the tush push is going away even without Jason Kelsey. It's like you do something so well that the league wants to ban that particular play. I can't imagine it's going away. So I think that hurts his touchdown upside a little bit. We know, like last year in LA with the Chargers, everything was, we got to get out on Austin Eckler because Kellen Moore doesn't like throwing his running backs. They're not a part of that's not a big part of his offense. So, I mean, that's you take away the touchdowns, you take away all those targets, the target touchdown upside and the target upside that he had in New York because he was such a focal point of that. Like he was the only game in town in that offense. I just don't see where the ceiling is for him. And he's 27. He's not young. So as a dynasty asset, it's kind of someone I'm trying to get out from underneath if I can, just because I don't see, I think there's a market for him with the transition to kind of, the offensive line is going to be better than what he had in New York, but I just don't see the ceiling that he had there. So I'm a little concerned.
See, I go back and forth on it because of everything you just laid out. Because I think everything you said negative about the Eagles, we could have applied to the Giants when we were coming out of. Outside of obviously the receiving work, which he got pelted with Eli Manning when he first started and so forth with that Brian Dable system afterwards and Joe Judge beforehand. Or I forget who was calling the plays during that Joe Judge era. But, not
as
great.
well you should.
Yeah, that's okay. But Saquon Barkley, the thing is I feel like he is the type of talent that has shown and has already overcome reasons to doubt him. And I think the change from Philly from New York is just so monumental. Like I'm trying to think of another running back that made that level. To me, it's almost like Dave Montgomery. If I had to kind of make a slight switch of somebody that Saquon Barkley is 10,000 times better than Dave Montgomery, but he went over to a different circumstance that had a better offensive line, a better offense, and it resulted in a career year for him. I think the same could happen for Saquon Barkley, even if he doesn't get the receiving work because Jalen Hurts might not throw to the running back, Kellen Moore doesn't scheme to the running back. And I understand the concerns with the tush push, but I think that just comes at the cost of Jalen Hurts' passing volume. I think the passing touchdowns might drop in favor of Saquon Barkley rushing touchdowns. And maybe that hurts the Devonta Smith. Maybe it hurts the Dallas Goedert. But Saquon Barkley is going to get his. Howie Roseman is a very conservative general manager, and he went out and made a splash here. So I'm all about it, honestly. I think Saquon Barkley is going to somehow live up to expectations this year.
Yeah, he very well may. I mean, he, like you said, the talent is elite. He was a quote unquote generational prospect as a running back when he came out. He hasn't done anything other than the injuries to kind of downplay that prospect status. He has been an elite talent at the running back position. But the injuries are legit. Like he missed 3 games last year. Has he played a full season since his rookie year? I don't think so. I don't remember. So that's got to be a concern. Like you got to pay attention to that. So, and he is, he's not getting younger. Nobody does. So
it's a bad age.
Yeah. So I guess the comp that you made that is kind of interesting, that would, going from a bad offense to a good offense, I think the obvious comp is Christian McCaffrey.
Sure. Even more so.
Now, I don't think this is a system that's going to use Barkley the way that McCaffrey did. I just don't think that, Kellen Moore and Kyle Shanahan are very, very different coordinators and play callers. And that's okay. But I just don't think he's going to he's not going to be the focal point of the offense like McCaffrey is in San Francisco.
Yeah. I do agree with that. And that's an element with, teams like the Giants that Saquon Barkley got to be every single level of that team. And now he's going to an offense where you can argue he's the third best player on offense, fourth even. If you really want to get crazy with it, I'd say third, if not second. Yeah. But he doesn't have to be the guy. I tend to think that that's only going to help him. But when it comes to, what Axton put in the chat about getting that trade, and then bring up a good question here as well, but I think it comes down to the cost of, as much as I am shilling Saquon right now, and I believe he'll live up to expectations, he's going as the RB3 at the latest pretty much in Dynasty drafts right now. So maybe not at the latest, but he's going in that RB3 to 5 range right now. And that he's willing to sell those guys.
Yeah, I think Dynasty running backs, you're talking Breece, Bijan, McCaffrey, and then it's probably Saquon and JT. So yeah, he's in that kind of 3 to 5 range.
Some people might go.
Yeah, depending on how you feel about him. So and X brings up a good point here. It does give them more options, but they gave the ball to DeAndre Swift at the goal line quite a bit, and he was just really bad, or just didn't do well. Like, let's be more precise. He didn't do well with those touches. So yeah, there's an opportunity. There's definitely, I would put, I think double-digit touchdowns is a reasonable expectation for him, but I just don't see I don't see the kind of game-breaking upside with like a Bijan, with a McCaffrey, with a Breece Hall. I just think this offense is not going to allow him. There's with Hurts and Brown and Devonta Smith. Yeah. I just think there's too many other kind of elite options, and Hurts obviously getting hit. Like Hurts is going to get. I'm more sure that Hurts is going to get double-digit touchdowns than I am Barkley is, even though I think they probably have a similar ceiling in rushing touchdowns. But just with the Kellen Moore offense, I just don't think he's going to be the focal point of the offense. I think Jalen Hurts is.
Yeah, I mean that's totally fair based on everything we've seen. It's pure conjecture to say that Saquon Barkley will be bouncing back in any big way or anything like that, because we haven't seen it. This is entirely a different circumstance. But DeAndre Swift did see 41 red zone touches last year, and that's in it's in 16 games. It was 18th most among running backs, so it's not a ton, but it's enough that if he was actually good with them, like Saquon Barkley will be, because I don't. What's weird? I don't think DeAndre Swift is that good of a running back, man. I feel like he's dramatically overrated, but that's another conversation.
I think he was not used the way he probably should be.
How many times are we going to say that, though?
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, maybe I'll prove me wrong in Chicago this year. But yeah, either way, that's only one player on the Eagles we've talked about. So let's talk about the other ones. I mean, A.J. Brown is kind of A.J. Brown at this point. We love him. I don't think anything changes there with A.J. Brown. Jalen Hurts is Jalen Hurts at this point. Is Jalen Hurts, where is he right now in your top 3, top 5? Has he fallen out of that?
Top 2.
Okay, top 2. There we go. So we can kind of put a wrap on Jalen Hurts because we both agree that he is going to get rushing touchdowns. He is going to run the ball, and he's going to pass the ball well with 2 of the best receivers in the league. Now, Devonta Smith was somebody that gave fantasy managers a few headaches last year. And I do want to ask you if you think a healthy Dallas Goedert for now and the introduction of Saquon Barkley do you think that's going to impact the value that this wide receiver 2 role and what Devonta Smith has had in past seasons? Do you think it's going to be a hit to him at all?
No, I don't think so. Like you said, especially with Kellen Moore coming over, he's just been a very pass-heavy play caller. So, and this is a really skinny target tree, right? It's Brown, it's Devonta, it's Goddard. Jalen Hurts doesn't dump off to the running back very much. So, yeah, I mean, Hurts running is going to take a few passing snaps and take them away. But, yeah, I mean, you've got 2 elite target earners and then Goddard, who is a perfectly cromulent tight end when he's on the field, which isn't very often. But, yeah, it's just the way this offense is structured. It's just Brown and Devonta get so much of the target share that, they're going to have, was it last year that Devonta, or 2 years ago that Devonta had the zero touch week 1 or something like that?
Yeah.
Probably 2 years ago now. So, I mean, that's going to happen. That happens to anyone who's kind of who's a 1B or in a secondary role. But yeah, these guys, like the target share that these guys are in is so massive that I have zero concerns with either one of them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But let me ask you right now, in a dynasty sense, would you rather have? I'm trying to pull up with this or that, I guess. Drake London or Devonta Smith?
London.
You rather have London?
Yeah, for sure.
I might rather have Smith, which is interesting.
He's the alpha. Like London's the alpha in an offense that's going to be dramatically different than it was last year.
Is he the alpha?
He has to be.
Kyle Pitts. It's going to happen. It has to happen. Let me throw one more name out there. Brandon Ayuk.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You don't totally know where he's playing this year. He's great.
I'm 99.97% sure he's going to be back in San Fran. Here's my San Fran take. I think that, and this is why I'm going to say Ayuk in answer to this. I think their defense might take a big step back this year. And I think that they may have. What's that?
The 49ers?
Yeah, with the injury to
Dre.
What's that?
Dre Greenlaw?
Yes, to Greenlaw in the Super Bowl. He's not playing this year, right? I don't expect to get anything from him. I think he's a really important part of their defense. You've still got Hufanga coming back from the ACL, so we don't know, how. I think this could be a really depleted defense, and I think that's going to increase their offensive. Like they're going to have to play at a faster pace. They're going to have to play more snaps, just because I don't think their defense is going to be the kind of top 5 defense that it usually is. So I would say Ayuk just because I think there's real upside for him this year that we haven't seen before.
You're the first person that I've heard say that, but it makes a lot of sense because not only the Drake Greenlaw situation, but they also let Arik Armstead walk to Jacksonville, who had
Chase Young is gone.
The career year. Chase Young is gone, who they didn't totally work out, but they traded because they needed someone there. And then so they
he wasn't great, but he gave them snaps, right? He gave them competent snaps, yeah. So now you've got to replace that.
Yeah, so it's going to come down to how much Nick Bosa can carry that pressures that they're going to have there, and whether Javon Hargreaves can continue to be a beast in the middle of the line or not. But I think that there are signs that the 49ers could take a step back on defense, especially after finishing dead last in passing attempts, because they just didn't need to, which is wild given how productive Brock Purdy was still.
Yeah, I think it's obviously really small sample size, but you saw it like in the Super Bowl when Greenlaw went out. Like it was a very different game in the second half and into the over. Like they couldn't get stops when they needed to with Greenlaw out. So I think that's kind of a precursor to what. Not that they're not going to be able to get stops. Obviously, not every team is as good offensively as Patrick Mahomes is in Kansas City. But yeah, I'm really concerned about how their defense plays, and I think that could lead to more, like you said, more snaps and just more kind of offensive production. Just because they're going to have to play very differently, I think, than they have the last couple of years. Yeah,
I mean, a drop from a top 3 unit to even a top 12 unit is significant.
It's really big.
Yeah, and that could very well happen in San Francisco. But we are talking Eagles. Is there anyone else? I mean, the only other person we haven't really talked about is Dallas Goedert, who but I have no idea what to make of Dallas Goedert. I have been the longest Dallas Goedert truther, and at this point, it's just I don't even know what I don't. He's touchdown or bust, right? I mean, I don't know if he's going to
He
see
really
enough
is,
balls and how many mouths here.
You cannot count on him to be your number one tight end because he doesn't play often enough, right? If you look, I made this point before, like if you take his career highs in targets, receptions, and yards, like Trey McBride was better than all those numbers last year and he didn't start until like week 7. So like, I think we have this vision in our head of Dallas Goedert being an elite tight end, and he's not, and he never has been. And so, yeah, he's in an offense where there's, it's not very crowded. It's not like Luke Musgrave where there's like 7 other guys who can get targets on any given week. Like I said, it's a very skinny target tree, but if you're not out there, you can't take advantage of that. And like, he never really has. So yeah, he's touchdown or bust. And what's his career high in touchdowns? Like 5. So it's,
something like that.
Yeah. I think he's a little bit overrated in that. I think there's that view of him when he was a rookie or, when he's younger behind Zach Ertz, that he was kind of going to be the next big thing at tight end. It hasn't happened.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think the big thing is that a lot of people are still romantic with him, and as am I, but it's something you have to admit that at this point we've seen the best of Dallas Goedert. Everything else from here on out is going to be a lesser version of those career years, and the career years were already, a high-end middling tight end one, like that tight end 5 to 8 range. And he's probably going to live in that range, maybe even dropping to, 7 to 10 with the Eagles this year, with how many mouths there are to feed there, like you've said so many times. So he's not someone I'm willing to count on anymore, and I love him. I will still play him in good spots, but he's a streaming option. He's not matchup proof, and he's certainly not trustworthy.
And you just can't. He's so hard to like. If you're on a best ball team, sure, he's fine because he's going to pop, and he's just really hard to predict, right? There's really been no consistency with his production either. So he's a really scary start if you're in a managed lineup league.
Yeah, I believe he's a good player. It's just that they don't need him to be a good player all the time. They don't need him to be the guy almost ever.
Right.
So unless anything changes in that front, it probably won't for fantasy. So one quick heater for the Eagles here before we move on to the Browns. Who's the backup running back? The correct answer is Jalen Hurts, but I'll let you choose a running back.
Who's the kid that drafted out of Clemson? What's his name?
Will Shipley.
It should be him. It's probably going to be Gainwell.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, I can't wait for that.
Because Sirianni just loves Gainwell for some reason. So.
Yeah, he is stuck around longer than I thought he would. And I like Gainwell coming out. But whatever. Let's move on to the AFC. And the AFC North, the Cleveland Browns. Oh, boy. What a team. We go from a team that's everything's laid out for us. We know what the Eagles are. We know who's getting the ball. And how many question marks do you have about Cleveland? I have so many. What are we getting from Deshaun Watson? When is Nick Chubb going to be back? When is Nick Chubb going to be not back but healthy enough to steal enough work from Jerome Ford? Can Amari Cooper, continue what he's been doing all his entire career? Can anyone else step up? Can David Njoku be consistent throughout the entire season? All these question marks that I'll let you just pick and choose where you want to start with, but Cleveland has such a wide range of outcomes they could have this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think you need to start at the top, and that's Deshaun Watson. What is he at this point?
Not good.
Yeah. I think we need to get the idea that prime Houston Deshaun Watson is ever coming back, because it's clearly not. So then what is he, and is he healthy enough? There's two questions. Is he healthy enough to get to, his peak and what he's capable of? Does he want to? I think that's a fair question. Ever since, the legal issues, let's say it that way, he just hasn't appeared motivated. He hasn't produced like a motivated player. So it's always kind of sticky trying to get into an athlete's head. So we'll leave that aside. It's
stuff we can't know.
It's an open question, right? But we can't know the answer. So is he healthy? He hasn't thrown yet. He's thrown, but he hasn't really thrown anything competitively. Shoulder injuries are tough, man. Especially his was kind of unique. So I'm nervous, but I still think I think everyone is so out on him that I think there's some profit opportunity with him. But I'm very nervous. But I mean, if you want to realize any profit on him, you have to buy now. You can't buy after, he has a good game in week 1. Then he's not for sale anymore, right? So you need to take advantage of this uncertainty if you think there's any opportunity there.
Yeah. I mean, he's someone that I'm so willing to be wrong on for a myriad of reasons, as you can imagine.
Yeah, very much so.
So it's always difficult because I know, like you said, we're not going to try to get into an athlete's head, but the big rumor circulating around social media over the last 2 weeks have been how much he's been traveling this offseason because he isn't ready to throw from the shoulder injury yet. So James Winston was at camp while he's traveling, and he's doing all these things. So that's really where those questions are asked about. Did Deshaun Watson, in theory, phone it in after inking a guaranteed hundreds and hundreds of millions? Again, like you said, we're not going to jump into whether that is true or not, but that's why people are talking about it. So the thing is, for me, it's been too long. I don't know how many excuses I want to make for Deshaun Watson from the last time he was a good football player, because you don't have to look at anything other than the fact that he has been a objectively horrific quarterback since leaving Houston. And I think it's possible that this is how it is. I think it's possible that he hit, a perfect situation. I mean, even Houston wasn't a perfect situation, but prime DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe that just helped everything out. Maybe he was a younger player, did a different mindset. He just entered the league. He didn't make his money yet. And things change sometimes. I mean, look at Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay got himself his bag, and he phoned it the hell in. But, I mean, it's hard to imagine because I don't think we've never had a situation like this where everything that's happened with Deshaun Watson and all the time he's missed and someone dropping off of this caliber. I mean, it's, I guess, Russell Wilson-esque, but Russell Wilson is older at least. So it's hard to tell with Deshaun Watson. I'm certainly more out than in. I just question whether I'm undervaluing his rushing upside, but at this point of the injuries, I don't think I am.
I don't think there's anything there. No.
And that was a big part of what made him so successful in Houston, was that ability to not only create on the move, but also pick up a first down. He had some incredible plays, fighting pressure in Houston and finding that man in the back of the end zone, typically Hopkins or something like that. We haven't seen a single slight look of that in years. And I think it's at this point we kind of need to accept that the Browns have miscalculated. Deshaun Watson is not going to work out. It's just my opinion that I'm sticking with.
Yeah, you bring up the rushing, and Watson was he was kind of more like,
it was a 400 to 600 yard guy.
Peak Aaron Rodgers, like Russell Wilson, that they had the ability to run, but it was never like a huge part of their production profile. It was such a threat to the defense that you had to account for it. And he had the ability to do it, but it was never, like Lamar Jackson level rushing. Rushing and like that. The other thing that's kind of interesting here is last year he had the shoulder surgery. 2 years ago was the 10, 11 game suspension, the official suspension. 3 years ago was the, in-season or in-school detention kind of suspension from the Texans. It's been 4 years since this guy played at an elite level.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he's 29. I mean, that's not old for a quarterback, but it's been a long time since we've seen him play at an exception at a very high level. So is he capable of getting back even a percentage of that? It's tough. Like I said, his market is down right now. So, but I like I said, I think there is profit potential, but like I said, you need to be willing to take the risk that he's just a zero at this point.
Yeah, and when I
If
mentioned
you want to
rushing,
realize that profit.
yeah, when I mentioned rushing upside, it's not necessarily about the rushing yards, but it's also about the ability to just move around, which I think is
Yep.
what was 90% of his, like being able to create time and get someone open was 90% of his ability in Houston, and it was terrific to watch. But the other half of just being somewhat mobile is the fact that he had 17 rushing touchdowns in 4 years in Houston.
Yep.
You know, that he's had 2 in 12 games with the Browns. That's significant, especially when you take away the 400 to 500 rushing yards that he adds on top of that. And if he's not going to do that anymore because he might not be the same mobile player, that's the difference between us talking about Deshaun Watson with that elite ceiling that could potentially make him worth that late round stab that against all odds maybe it works out because he has that ceiling. He doesn't have that ceiling anymore because he's not going to be running like he was in Houston. So either way, that's probably more than enough we talk about Deshaun Watson. But when it comes to the guys around him, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, where do you find yourself with them right now? Because those guys are both kind of lingering in the murky side of fantasy drafts right now. That low end, mid to low end, I would even say low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3, Amari Cooper draft range, and then middling tight end 1 range for David Njoku. Both those guys could easily outperform that. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm in on both. Like, if you know what you're getting into with Cooper, like he is 30, so he's going to turn 30 this year. This will be his age 30 season. So
26 still.
Yeah, so you're basically, if you're buying him, you're buying for the production, and that's because there's no resale value there anymore. So, but I think the production should be pretty well. I mean, he had that 50-point fantasy game last year in the fantasy playoffs. Yeah, so I mean, consistency has always been an issue with him, but you still see that elite. He still flashes that elite upside. So yeah, I have zero concerns with the production I'm going to get from him over the course of the season. Yeah, you're going to have to take some down games, but that's kind of the going rate for any receiver or any player, to be honest. And Njoku, I'm significantly higher on, I think, than the market is, just because I think there's a lot of question. All his production came with Joe Flacco. I don't think you can take a player like that and see what he did with the opportunities he had and say, well, we're going to go away from that. So, I think Stefanski and Ken Dorsey, who's there now, I think he's going to be just a big part of this offense. I think we'll talk about Nick Chubb next in the running game. I think this is going to kind of like last year we saw kind of the transformation of the Stefanski offense kind of without Nick Chubb. I don't think you're getting Nick Chubb back in any significant way. So I think this offense is, they signed Judy, or they traded for Judy and then extended him. So I just think this is going to be a more pass happy offense than we've kind of seen historically from Stefanski. It'll be more resemble what we saw last year.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, I think the only question is whether can Deshaun Watson support a more pass happy offense with the struggles that he's been doing the last couple of years. Because if we get the efficiency levels that we've had the last 2 years with Deshaun Watson, adding volume is only going to make it worse. But you had Njoku as a better player than he was 2 or 3 years ago.
I mean, if you compare Watson to like what they got out of Flacco last year, I mean, there probably are some, like Flacco killed him with the interceptions. Like that was his problem. He was very good, except the turnovers were just killer there. And there were so many of them. And that was why, in the playoff time, like you can't survive those kind of turnovers. And that's what happened in the playoff game. The interceptions just absolutely buried them. I think Watson can kind of do exactly what Flacco did, even in his kind of diminished state, and just, tame down the turnovers that Flacco gave them. Like, that's still a really good offense.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, the AFC North is, to me, totally up for grabs. And the back half of the schedule for most of these guys are playing each other, so it's going to be a crazy end to the year. And we'll see whether Deshaun Watson makes it to the end of the year, just purely on health as opposed to anything else. But there is some upside of, we know that there's at least Jameis Winston behind him. There's Tyler Huntley behind him. There are, which it'll be Jameis Winston if Watson missed time. So fantasy-wise, you could even argue that might even be an upgrade if Deshaun Watson struggles as we've seen. So there is that security that maybe hasn't always existed.
Fantasy-wise, maybe, but not
fantasy
really.
I'm purely talking fantasy. This is a fantasy show, Joe. We're talking fantasy. So yeah, but the running back, or before we talk about the running back room, is there any? What are your thoughts on Jerry Jeudy? I have to ask it because they traded for him. They paid good money for him. I am so unbelievably out on the player I once loved. I am so done with him. It's not even funny. But what are your thoughts on Jerry Jeudy? Because I know you're lower on him than I was.
I think I'm in the exact same spot that you were, or that you are. Like, yeah, he was like my second favorite receiver coming out of that class. I was a huge Justin Jefferson fan. But yeah, I like Jerry Jeudy a lot. This hasn't happened, right? And he hasn't, yes, he's still the great elite route runner that he was coming out of college, but he doesn't do anything else well. Doesn't catch the ball well, can't stay healthy. There's like no run after the catch with him. So he's not, not a contested catch guy. What do you got? You got a really good route runner who can't catch the ball. What good is that? So yeah, I'm out. I've been out for a couple of years. That was one. That was one of my prospect transitions that I'm kind of proud of. It didn't take me very long to get off of that one.
There you go. That's all it takes sometimes. So yeah, let's jump into that running back room. That beloved, beautiful Jerome Ford, Nick Chubb, maybe running back room with Deontay Foreman in there as well. Just to add some spice, some Naeem Hines in there. All the fun stuff in this Cleveland group. Now, everything I've read about Nick Chubb suggests that he's closer to going to be on the pup, which is what I would have expected anyway. So, do you think Jerome Ford is going too late in drafts right now? Because I don't think people are really focusing on him whatsoever. Like he went really late, even in the Scott Fishbowl draft.
Yes. So, again, let's start at the top. I don't think we're going to get anything. Like, I think the best case for Nick Chubb is like half of what you got from Javonte Williams last year, because I don't think he's going to be ready until like midseason, and then I don't think he's going to be very good. Like this time, remember last year at this time, we were going into training camp and everybody was, oh, Javonte Williams looks great. He's out there running. He's cutting. This is fantastic. And we said, okay, great. He's cutting against grass. That's awesome. Let's see what happens. You can't count on these guys to come back and be themselves 100% after that, multi-ligament injury and surgery. And I think Chubb's probably was even more distressed. Like it wasn't that
it was worse.
Chubb was week 2, Javonte was week 4 or something like that when he tore his. So it's not like it was like significantly earlier that we can expect more. So yeah, I fully expect him to start on PUP. I don't expect him. We heard all these stories about, oh, he's come back from this before. Well, he's 29 now, right? This isn't Georgia. He's not 21. So yeah, I think he's going to struggle coming back. So yeah, I think this is a Ford and Deonta Foreman backfield. I've been super high on Deonta Foreman all offseason ever since the Browns signed him. And if you think about it, like last year, obviously they had Chubb, but they had Jerome Ford. They just kind of really waited a really long time to bring in like Kareem Hunt, and then they traded for Pierre Strong during training camp. Like they went out in January and signed Deonta Foreman off the street. So they made that commitment very early that they knew that they wanted him like in their running back room. And Deonta Foreman he's poor man's Nick Chubb, really. He's basically the same. He's not as good as Nick Chubb.
Same play style.
Don't get me wrong. But yeah, exact same play style. So yeah, I think he kind of slots into that role a little bit. And Jerome Ford was productive last year, but he wasn't very good. He just wasn't very efficient. So, and like D'Onta Foreman has just produced everywhere he's been since he recorded the 1,000-yard season in Carolina. After they traded McCaffrey, was good last year. Like when both Herbert and Roschon were hurt in Chicago, he had a 3-touchdown game. So I think for a guy who's basically just sitting at the back of people's rosters or on waivers, he's a guy I'm very, very interested in making sure he's a guy I want to have on my roster just in case things go really well for him.
Yeah, and I think it could go very well if he just makes the roster. Like that'll be the telling sign for me, because whenever I see a team, and it doesn't happen often because there aren't many third-string running backs that don't provide special teams value. That's why we honestly have very much enjoyed having D'Onta Foreman last year, because if he was active when at least someone was hurt, he was going to get touches because it's the only reason for him to be active. And if he wasn't active, then he wasn't going to see the field anyway. So that's the nice thing with him, is that if he's on the roster, it's because they have a plan to use him, because it's not going to be a healthy scratch for 17 weeks, and it's not to be a special teamer. It's going to be to get some carries, and
that's what Nyheim Hines is for.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not a big Jerome Ford fan either. I didn't like him it was Cincinnati, right? Was where he went. I think it was Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. Was it UCLA? I don't remember.
Jerome Ford. I'm going to quickly fact check this one. Jerome Ford. It was Cincinnati. Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought he's just a home run hitter to me. That's what I kind of thought at the time, was if he has a hole, he'll run straight through it. And if not, he won't do well. And to me, that's kind of echoed what I saw last year. So I don't mind grabbing Jerome Ford at cost right now. And I certainly don't mind taking the late shot down to Foreman for every reason you just laid out. But Nick Chubb right now, what would you send? Would you remotely buy him? Is there a price where you would buy him?
No, I don't want him.
So what would you sell him at right now?
Like I honestly don't want him on my roster. So yeah, you give me a future second, or I think I can get like a 25 second. So I'm not just going to give him away, but like if you can get a future second for him, and I think like if you look at best ball drafts, like, and obviously this is a dynasty show, but obviously like Nick Chubb's a year-to-year guy. There's no question about that. He's got, this is his last year of his contract. And like in best ball drafts, he's going in the kind of early 100s, right? He goes like right around where Ford does, which is insane to me. So there are people who believe in Nick Chubb this year. So I think if you're kind of discerning, you can get probably a future second for him. Yeah,
and even if you have to throw something else in there, I think it's certainly not a bad process, because if he's starting the year on the pup and then we know there's a ramp-up period, it's going to be a while until we have the slightest chance of Nick Chubb's value swinging back up.
If I can move like Chubb and a future third for a future second, I'm all for that.
I think you could. So maybe that's what some of our listeners should do if they have a Nick Chubb share. I do not have any, which a long time ago made me sad, but does not make me sad right now. But let's any other Browns that you want to talk about here? Any Cedric Tillman, any Elijah Moore love?
I think it's interesting that they said Tillman is going to run the outside. He's going to be the other outside receiver opposite Amari Cooper.
Where is Judy playing? Slot?
Judy's playing slot. Yeah, he's full-time slot.
What is
another reason?
Elijah Moore's purpose on this team at this point?
Exactly. So yeah, Elijah Moore is full fade. He's dust at this point. So yeah, another reason to full fade Judy is this isn't a team that's going to run like a very high, like a super high percentage of 3 receiver sets. I don't think, because they have David Njoku if they want to go, 21. So Elijah Moore is dust. I don't have any interest in him. Tillman, like the teams, even though he didn't do anything last year, the team still seems to have some faith in him. Like if he's the starting on the outside opposite Cooper, there's a path for some touches there. So I have some interest in him. Like, he's a back end roster guy, but I think he should be. I'd rather have him on my roster than on waivers.
Fair enough. All right, let's jump on over to our third and final team here. Back into the NFC, it's them boys, the Dallas Cowboys, who had a very memorable 2023-4 season that kind of went exactly how it's been every single year for the last 20 billion decades in Dallas. They had a good regular season with Mike McCarthy. They had an embarrassing playoff loss to a certain NFC North team. Team was it?
No shame in getting destroyed by the Packers. That happens.
There you go. I was giving you that. I was setting you up for that. But yeah, we're back again. Mike McCarthy. Is Mike McCarthy calling plays? Is that okay? We got that locked in. So they lose Dan Quinn on the defensive side, but they obviously have McCarthy for the fantasy purposes. Front office remains the same because it's Jerry Jones, and we're back with next to no offseason changes for this Dallas team. That it is the same group. We got CeeDee Lamb, we got Jake Ferguson, we got letting go of Tony Pollard and bringing back Zeke, I guess, is their splash of the offseason. Yeah. So where do you want to start with this team that has so little changing? And I am so disinterested. Like the Cowboys are boring because we know what their season is going to be before it even starts, man. 10-7. That's.
I'll just say that I brought this up on the Thursday show. I think there's a potential here that this team is just catastrophically bad. Like this is
awful. I think it's
under the radar, like top 5 draft pick team, because this could just implode. Like this could be just an absolute shit show.
One CeeDee Lamb injury away. They're one CeeDee Lamb injury away.
Or Dak.
Bottom 8. Yeah, or Dak, a bottom 8 offense. Bottom 5.
And even still, like this could just go really bad. I think their defense is really kind of overrated without Dan Quinn, and I don't think Mike Zimmer makes a big difference. And like I said the other day, like the way this offense is going to run, like if you're relying on Zeke O'Dowdle to be your running back, you're not serious about running the ball. So you're just not serious about that at all. They're going to throw a ton. Like Mike Zimmer could have to go to the hospital with like a 225 or 175 blood pressure at some point this season. They have to take a leave of absence. This could just be a really bad team. And so I really like Dak. Obviously Lamb is great. No, he's a top 3 dynasty asset. He is like the amount of touches and looks and targets he's going to get in this offense, because I think they're going to have to play just a ton of garbage time. They're going to have to play catch up a lot. Like he could break fantasy this year. Like he did last year to an extent. Like he was obviously, the playoff run and everything, the Detroit game in the playoffs was massive. The fantasy playoffs, just to be clear, but yeah, he's going to get so many targets, assuming he can stay healthy. I don't see it with, like, Tony Pollard couldn't run last year. And is Rico Dowdle even as good as Tony Pollard? Like, I'm no Tony Pollard fan, but Rico Dowdle's its 5th year undrafted free agent. Zeke Elliott is dust. He's good at pass protecting, and he's probably good inside the goal line, but those aren't things that help you if you can't get to the goal line. So what is his even role in the offense? Just the entire offseason is just like, what is Jerry Jones waiting for? Like, what is he doing? I'm sure they went and saying, okay, I got to pay Micah Parsons. I got to pay Dak. I got to pay CeeDee Lamb at some point, but they haven't done any of those things. It's like, they still need to pay those guys. They've got $12 million salary cap. Obviously you can decrease Dak. Dak's got like a $55 million cap hit right now. You could decrease that with an extension. Same thing with Lamb, obviously to a lesser extent. But like Micah Parsons' cap hit is only $5 million. So if you re-sign him, that cap hit's going to go up. So that kind of offsets whatever Lamb's does. I just don't understand. Like, they've got room to make these extensions and go for it, and make a free agent signing that could help. I don't understand what they're doing.
I think Jerry Jones has the answers. I think that's what this is. I think he thought last year was the team. He added Stephon Gilmore. They had their great defense in theory with Dan Quinn right there. You have Dak Prescott. You have CeeDee Lamb putting up a 1,700-yard, 12-touchdown season as the leader in almost every single wide receiver metric known to man. And they still got the doors blown out of them at home. I think he's out of answers, and he's going to let this team ride it out, implode if need be, and then, I mean, I don't think Jerry Jones knows where to go next. I think that's what we had as a result of sitting on his hands the entire offseason, because he doesn't have any more answers. I don't blame him after watching the same result 10 years in a row. It's still going to be fine for fantasy for some of these guys. CeeDee Lamb will be, not like you said, obnoxiously ridiculous when I'm going against him, and is borderline one of the very few untradeable players from one of my rosters. The rest of this receiving room, can Brandon Cooks jump back into anything relevant? Because I was really disappointed in Brandon Cooks last year. I thought he could have a genuine role, and he had snaps. He just didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, he was bad. And I think that's the big question with this team is what are the other options other than CeeDee Lamb? You got Ferguson, who's a nice player. Obviously, he's a former Badger.
Chain mover.
Full and mad respect for him, but he's not an elite talent. He was like a 5th-round draft pick. So, he works in the offense just because tight end always works in this offense. Going back to the Blake Jarwins, and even with Dalton Schultz was there and healthy, those guys, they're always productive. So Jason Witten, the corpse of Jason Witten was productive. I think that role is going to be productive, but I don't, if you put like a Kyle Pitts level talent in that, it could be spectacular, but Ferguson's just a guy. So he's probably going to get some touchdowns just, by virtue of the number of snaps they were like massively. They were up there with Kansas City as the highest neutral pass rate teams in the league. So I think they're going to throw a ton. So I think there's upside for these guys. Like, even though I think Cooks is dust, there's going to be games where he produces just because he has to, and just being opposite.
I said that last year though.
Yeah, no, I agree. He was bad, but there's going to be opportunity that he's not someone I'm ever going to be excited about starting, but as a bye week kind of, or a desperation kind of chuck out there, he's fine. I am kind of interested in Brian Flournoy as a third
Everyone's
receiver.
favorite trending sleeper player there.
You want to go deep, like they're talking about Jalen Tolbert as a third receiver. Tolbert's done absolutely nothing for 2 years. Like, there's no reason to think that he's anything. Flournoy was like an elite athlete, like 9.89 RAS, something like that, 6 foot, 200. So I think he's got a shot just because of the volume that this offense is going to have to play with. So if you're in a really, really deep league, I like him quite a bit as a deep sleeper. But yeah, otherwise, and we should talk about Dak, who I think is kind of wildly underrated.
You think? After all the disses that we've thrown on Dallas so far.
Yeah, but I think he's wildly underrated as a fantasy asset in that, like, they are going to have to throw a ton this year. Can you imagine? Is there any scenario where a Zeke and Rico Dowdle backfield gives you like any production at all? No. So they're going to have to throw a ton.
They're not about him 6 units.
If their defense is bad, like I don't think they're going to be terrible. There's too much talent there, but like I don't think they're going to be like. I think Dan Quinn is a big part of that defense, and I think they're going to miss him quite a bit. And I think things could go really south if Zimmer comes in and tries to do his Zimmer shit and just alienates like everyone on the team. So yeah, if the defense is kind of, if they're a 18 to 20 defense, this is a disaster, and they're going to have to throw just an absolute shit ton.
Yeah, and they've already shown the willingness to do that with Dak, and without Pollard.
They did last year.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And they still tried to cram it down the throat with Pollard, and it wasn't working. They still tried to do it, but that led them to air it out nonstop. So unless you're expecting Zeke to be more effective than Pollard was last year, which he won't be, then it's going to be the same old situation for Dak Prescott. And same old was a top 3 fantasy quarterback last season. So, and that's with a decent defense. It could take, like you said, and like we've been saying, it could take a significant step back without Dan Quinn, without Stephon Gilmore, with plenty of question marks across the entire roster of, I mean, if DeMarvin Overshown and the other linebacker they drafted this year, if they don't get any stable production in linebacker, this team is going to be such a train wreck. I mean, I like Damone Clark, but they've been trying to fill that hole left by, prime Leighton Vander Esch for 1 year. They've been trying to fill that hole for a decade now, with Jalen Smith to Vander Esch to Damone Clark to all of this now, and it's just been terrible.
The one caveat that I would throw, that one thing that concerns me about this team is, like, their defense was pretty bad against the run last year, and might get worse because they just don't have any linebackers, right? I mean, yeah, Zimmer should help theoretically, but they don't have any linebackers, like you said. So if teams can just run down their throats with leads, that kind of significantly takes away from their upside. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. And just to jump back on Jake Ferguson, and I'm not just saying this because I drafted him in Scott Fishbowl, but I think Jake Ferguson could have a very good season. And I think it comes as a result of everything that you were just saying. If Dak Prescott is going to continue to throw the ball at the rate that he's been throwing the last year, he has to throw to someone. I don't think Brandon Cooks is that player anymore. Jake Ferguson not only has that role in the offense of that 71 receptions, which is really damn good for a second-year tight end, honestly. But what really I love about it is being number 1 in red zone targets. 25. He had 25 red zone targets last year. He played a full season, so that's 17 games. But that's good. That's good. I like that. I like red zone targets with my tight ends, especially when I know that the rushing attack has really struggled to punch scores in recent seasons. So maybe Zeke could do that again, but he wasn't even that great with it with New England either. So I think Jake Ferguson will be I think he could be a top 6 tight end. I really wouldn't be surprised. I think he's going to get there. I think he could get volume.
Yeah, the touchdown volume could be that. Like we saw in the playoff game when it was garbage, 3 second half tight end or touchdowns.
He was great.
When they were in just full catch-up mode, and the Packers pulled all their defensive players.
He was great with that.
Starters, but yeah, so if this kind of plays out like you and I kind of expect, then that garbage time. But like this team is gonna be terrifying if you're playing against them. Like if you're playing against Dak or CD, and like you go through 3 quarters and oh shit, they haven't done anything. This is awesome, and then like all of a sudden they put up 20 points in the 4th quarter. You're not going to be able to rest if you're playing against a Dallas player, just because I think they could have a lot of garbage time.
Yeah, they very well could. And with Jake Ferguson as well, 84%. Let's see, 2, 3, 4. I think it's 6 games over the back half of the season. He had 90% route participation or more.
Yeah.
So that's a sign of the growth of the role that he grew into. I mean, he started the season in that 50 to 60, and it slowly ramps up from there. Player Profile is another great site to check out for stuff like this. That's where I found that. But I think Jay Ferguson could have a good role, and he's someone I'm more than willing to target in drafts right now. And I don't usually gamble on the mid-round tight ends. It usually feels disgusting, but Jake Ferguson is becoming one of those exceptions for me.
If you were into Dalton Schultz like 2 years ago, then you should
and we should have been
just as interested as Jake Ferguson. Yeah,
and you should be interested in Dalton Schultz from a couple of years ago because he was very good for fantasy.
Yeah, and that role is productive, and Ferguson is good enough to be productive in that role.
Yeah, And that's all it takes. Any other? I mean, we haven't touched on running backs. Let's touch on the running backs, I guess. Not Tony Pollard, Zeke, Rico Dowdle. Is any I guess we did kind of. But is there any one of these guys? If you had to pick Zeke or Dowdle, who you pick? It's still Zeke.
It's not Zeke. The answer is not Zeke for me. I just I don't know. Is this an offense that's going to get a lot of 1-yard plunges
Is this a team that's stuck in the past, Joel?
Well, okay, fair.
Good point. There you go. Yeah. I mean, that's to me where they're going to go with. They brought him back because they're going to use him, and Zeke wants to be there, and they're all happy, and they'll happily walk their way to a very middling season.
Yeah, I think Dowdle. I think there's some upside, like in Dowdle just being what Tony Pollard was 2 years ago. Like, they're not dissimilar players. They're very similar players. Dowdle's a little smaller, but so yeah, if they have to throw, or if they do throw as much as we kind of think, then I think Dowdle is much more likely to be the kind of hurry up back and get a lot more snaps than Zeke. So that's where I would say. But if you're just looking for like rushing yards, he's not going to be your guy. I think there's potential. Like if you're in a standard scoring league, I'm not interested in Dowdle at all. But if you're in a full point PPR, then I'm interested in Dowdle because I think there'll be some leak out running back catch opportunities for him.
Yeah, there are worse gambles to make in the double-digit rounds than, what we always say, and what most Dynasty people and most redraft people will say is that when you're late in drafts, you want to take shots on guys that you'll know fairly quickly what you have. Rico Dowdle's role will be evident in week 1. And he will have a role. Whether it's meaningful at all is another question entirely, but he will have a role because they historically have always split, and Zeke isn't what he was. So if they want to give Zeke 90% of the touches, they by all means give us the worst football known to man, but they will not do that.
Good luck with all that.
Yes. Now, I should have done this as we went through, but I want to do it now as I'm quickly pulling up the odds for each of these teams. The Dallas Cowboys, or as soon as I find it, what do you think their win total is?
9.5.
That's what I would guess it is as I continue to scroll because it's not alphabetical. Okay, it is 9.5. So you're taking the over or under on that?
Slamming the under. What's the juice on the under?
Okay, well the problem is they don't have a 9.5 line. They have the under 8.5 would be the closest you can go, and that would be plus 205.
Oh, I'm plus odds under
for an 8-win team. I could see it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, all right.
I got to go make that bet right now.
There we go. Okay, that's on DraftKings using those odds. Not a sponsor, but maybe one day. But let's jump over to the Browns when I can find them. What do you think the Browns line is?
Ooh,
it's a tough one.
That's a tough decision. Tough division. Made the play. It's probably got to be 9.5 too.
8.5 minus 135 with over 8.5 plus 115 under 8.5.
Man, I want to. That's a tough number.
It is tough.
You go under 8.5 means they're going to go 8 and 9. I think they're better. I think they should be a 500 team, but as good as their defense was last year, Houston figured them out pretty easily in the playoffs. And if Deshaun's just bad, then that's probably a stay away for me, but I would have to take the under if I took it. Just that division is so good that if anything goes wrong, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I think they get to 9, but it's certainly a stay away from me. Nothing that I'm willing to go. And we'll go to this last team here, the Philadelphia Eagles, who I've already placed a bet on for them to win the division at plus 100. So, which I believe the Cowboys are pretty much right there still with them, which honestly wild to me. But what do you think the Eagles line is?
10.5.
You're crushing it today. Crushing it today. 10.5 it is. Minus 130 on over 10.5, plus 110 under 10.5. Which side are you taking if you had to pick?
I'm taking the over.
Taking the over? You want over 12.5 at plus 310?
Over 12, that means 13-4. That's tough. They play the Packers on opening day, so that only gives them 4 or 3 to play.
Right, yeah, so it's immediately losses.
Yeah, I'm not taking that number, but like I would go over 11. I think they could go 12-5.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that'll be fun. I think I'll go. I think I'd go with the over as well. I think they're an 11-win team. Probably wouldn't take it at minus 130, but if it parlayed it with some action, who knows?
If you could get like an alt line on over 11, I would take that.
Yeah, and you could probably get that like 100 on some book somewhere.
Yeah. I would think you could probably get like plus 200, something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of does it here, Joel. Any other final thoughts on any of the 3 teams we've talked about today? Eagles, Browns, Cowboys. Any thoughts? If one of these teams was going to surprise us, which one would it be?
Cleveland. My concern with them is the division is so strong. So I could see them, if you have another Burrow injury, something like that, if Baltimore takes a step back, if the Pittsburgh quarterback situation doesn't work out, I could see them winning the division. But yeah, I think there's seas need to part for that to happen.
Yeah. Zeke or Jerome Ford?
Jerome Ford.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. All right. That's more than enough for me that I can throw off the hip here. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Dynasty After Party with myself and Joel here. Be sure to follow Joel. Gotta follow Joel here. Fantastic Twitter follow at the Joel Wirth. And, of course, Club Fantasy itself at Club Fantasy FFL. And you can follow myself at Michael_Sicoli. Want to remind everyone again to make sure that you check out Dynasty Nerds if you are remotely interested in Dynasty, which, if you're watching this show, you should be. Are. Great tools, great guys, great podcasts, and, amazing access that Dynasty Nerds has there. So if you want a subscription, just go to dynastynerds.com. Use promo code CLUBFANTASY. Promo code Club Fantasy to save 50% at dynastynerds.com. Join the Nerd Herd. On our behalf, Joel, it's good to be back. Good to be back.
Glad to have you back.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we kick it off here?
No, that's it. Training camp this week. Things are ramping up.
We'll see you, Mr. Scampers, and things
Thanks,
are ramping up.
Thanks everyone for checking in. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
As always.
We'll be right on back soon enough. So, like a disco ball, the Dynasty. It's been too long, man. It's been too long.
Got to get back in the groove.
On my head, we're gonna have to look at it. So I have to remind myself. Dynasty, we know it's like a disco ball. Keeps on spinning year round. So join the club every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here with Club Fantasy. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you all for tuning in.